Elena Rothman stepped out of the board meeting and straight into a downpour. By the time she reached the satellite office near midnight, her dress clung to her skin, her hair dripped cold water down her spine, and her lips had turned pale. Malcolm Hayes, her famously cold executive assistant, locked the door behind them, turned on the heater, and laid out a towel and dry clothes on the chair. His voice was flat, non-negotiable. "You need to change. Now." Elena backed away, arms wrapping around herself, her voice breaking. "Please, don't make me undress." But Malcolm did not change his mind. He was protecting her from something she did not yet understand. The office was supposed to be empty. Elena had planned it that way. The executive floor of the satellite building was dark except for the security lights in the hallway, and the rain hammered against the windows like fists. She had come here instead of going home because home meant questions, meant staff, meant the risk of someone seeing her like this. Wet, shaking, stripped of the armor she wore every day in front of cameras and shareholders. She pushed through the glass door and left a trail of water across the polished floor. Her heels squelched with every step. The silk dress that had looked flawless under the conference room lights now clung to her ribs, her thighs, cold and unforgiving. Her hair hung in dark ropes down her back, dripping steadily onto her shoulders. She could feel her teeth starting to chatter, but she clenched her jaw and kept walking. She just needed to grab her laptop bag and leave. 5 minutes, maybe less. But Malcolm was already there. He stood near the desk by the window, his back to her, arms crossed as he looked out at the storm. He did not turn around when she entered, but she knew he had heard her. Malcolm always heard everything. He was her executive assistant, though that title never quite captured what he actually did. He managed her schedule, her correspondence, her crises. He ran interference with the board, smoothed over tensions with department heads, and somehow kept her days from collapsing into chaos. He was precise, methodical, and almost unnervingly calm. People called him cold. Elena had never corrected them. He turned now, and his eyes moved over her in one quick sweep. No reaction, no shock, just assessment. That was Malcolm. He saw the problem, calculated the solution, and acted. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulled his jacket off, and held it out toward her. Elena shook her head and stepped back. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I'm fine." Malcolm did not lower the jacket. His tone was flat, matter-of-fact. "You're not?" He draped the jacket over the back of a chair instead and moved to the corner of the room where a small cabinet held emergency supplies. He pulled out a towel, a bottle of water, and a sealed package that looked like it contained clothing. Elena watched him with mounting unease. He was not asking. He was preparing. He turned off the air conditioning and switched on the portable heater near the desk. The warmth hit her immediately, but it only made her shiver harder. Malcolm set the towel on the chair, placed the package of dry clothes beside it, and then walked to the door. He locked it with a soft click. Elena's breath caught. Her hands tightened around her own arms. Malcolm turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "You need to change out of those clothes. Now." The words landed like a command, not a suggestion. Elena felt her chest tighten. She took another step back, her spine pressing against the edge of the desk. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I don't need to change. I'm leaving." Malcolm shook his head once. "No, you're not." He gestured toward the window where the rain was still coming down in sheets. "The roads are flooded. Your driver can't get here for at least another hour. You stay in those clothes, you're going to get sick. Or worse." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but her body betrayed her. A violent shiver ran through her, and she had to grip the desk to steady herself. Malcolm saw it. Of course he did. He moved closer, but not too close. He kept a careful distance, his hands at his sides. His voice softened, just a fraction. "I'm not trying to make this harder. But you can't stay like that. Elena felt the panic rising in her throat. She could not explain it. She could not make him understand why the idea of undressing, even alone, even behind a closed door, made her feel like the walls were closing in. She shook her head again, harder this time. Her voice cracked. "Please, don't make me undress." The words hung in the air between them. Malcolm went still. His eyes searched her face, and for the first time, she saw something shift in his expression. Not pity, not confusion. Recognition. He understood that this was not about stubbornness or pride. This was fear. He took a slow breath and nodded once. Then he walked to the corner of the room and pulled a privacy screen from behind a filing cabinet. It was the kind used during office renovations, tall and freestanding. He set it up near the chair where the dry clothes waited, creating a small enclosed space. Then he walked back to the door and turned to face the wall. His voice was quiet, deliberate. "I'm going to stand here. I won't turn around. The door is locked. No one is coming in. You go behind the screen. You change. And when you're done, you tell me. That's it." Elena stared at him. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to walk out into the rain and disappear. But her legs were shaking now, and the cold was creeping deeper into her bones. She looked at the screen, at the towel, at the dry clothes folded neatly on the chair. Malcolm had thought of everything. He always did. And he was offering her control. Not taking it. Offering it. She moved slowly toward the screen, her wet shoes leaving prints on the floor. She glanced back at Malcolm. He was still facing the wall, hands clasped loosely behind his back. He was not looking. He was not even close. She stepped behind the screen and stopped. The towel was soft, the hoodie looked warm, and there was even a pair of loose sweatpants that would fit. She reached for the hem of her dress, and her hands started to shake. Not from the cold, from something deeper. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Malcolm did not turn around. His answer was simple. "Because you need help. And I'm here." Elena closed her eyes. She peeled the wet dress away from her skin, wrapped herself in the towel, and pulled on the dry clothes as fast as she could. The hoodie was too big, the sleeves hung past her hands, and it smelled faintly of detergent and something clean. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, feeling the warmth start to seep back into her body. When she stepped out from behind the screen, Malcolm was still facing the wall. She cleared her throat softly. He turned, and his eyes flicked over her once, checking. Satisfied, he nodded and gestured to the chair. "Sit." She did. He moved to the small kitchenette in the corner and came back with a mug of something hot. Ginger tea. She took it with both hands, and the heat spread through her fingers. Malcolm pulled up a chair across from her, far enough to give her space, close enough to make sure she was okay. He leaned back, arms crossed, his expression calm but watchful. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Elena shook her head quickly. "No," Malcolm nodded. He did not push. That was the thing about Malcolm. He never pushed. He waited. And somehow that was worse, because waiting meant he cared, and caring meant she could not hide from him the way she hid from everyone else. She stared down into the tea, her voice barely audible. "I just don't like feeling trapped." Malcolm's gaze did not waver. "You weren't trapped. You had a choice." Elena looked up at him, and something in her chest cracked open. "Did I?" Malcolm met her eyes. "Yes, you did. You still do. You want to leave right now, I'll call the driver. I'll walk you out myself. But I'm not going to let you make a choice that hurts you just because you're scared." Elena felt the tears coming before she could stop them. She set the mug down and pressed her hands to her face. Malcolm did not move. He did not try to comfort her. He just sat there, steady and unshaken, and let her break. When she finally looked up, her voice was raw. "I'm not supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to have it together." Malcolm's expression softened, just barely. "You do have it together. You just got caught in the rain." She laughed, a shaky, bitter sound. "That's not what I mean." Malcolm leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I know what you mean. And I'm telling you, you don't have to be perfect all the time. Not here, not with me." Elena wiped her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. Malcolm Hayes, the man who never smiled, never raised his voice, never let anything rattle him. The single dad who juggled a daughter's school schedule and a demanding job without ever complaining. The assistant who anticipated her needs before she even knew she had them. She took a shaky breath. "How do you do it?" Malcolm frowned slightly. "Do what?" Elena gestured vaguely. "Stay calm. Stay in control, no matter what." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. "I don't. I just know when to ask for help. And I know when someone else needs it." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain. "My daughter taught me that. Kids don't hide when they're scared. They just tell you, and they trust you to handle it." Elena felt something shift inside her. Trust. That was what Malcolm was offering. Not judgment, not control. Trust. She stood slowly, the oversized hoodie hanging loose around her frame. "Thank you." Malcolm turned, and for the first time that night, the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to give that hoodie back." Elena sat back down, the mug warming her palms, but the tension in her shoulders had not eased. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the oversized hoodie or the borrowed sweatpants. Malcolm had seen something tonight that no one else ever had. Not the polished CEO who commanded boardrooms, but the woman underneath who was still learning how to ask for help without feeling like she was falling apart. Malcolm moved to his desk and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then set it down with a faint frown. Elena watched him, her voice tentative. "What's wrong?" Malcolm glanced up at her. "Driver's stuck on the other side of the district. Flooding's worse than I thought. He can't get through for at least another 90 minutes. Elena felt her chest tighten again. 90 minutes, alone here, with Malcolm, with nowhere to hide. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I'll call a car service, or I'll walk. It's fine." Malcolm turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable. "It's not fine. The streets are flooded. You walk out there now. You're putting yourself in danger." Elena shook her head, already moving toward the door. "I can't stay here." Malcolm stepped in front of her, not blocking her exactly, but close enough that she had to stop. His voice was calm, steady. "Why not?" Elena opened her mouth, but no answer came. Because staying meant being vulnerable. Because staying meant Malcolm would keep seeing her like this. Because staying meant she could not run. She wrapped her arms around herself, the sleeves of the hoodie hanging past her wrists. Malcolm watched her for a moment, then stepped back. He walked to the coat rack near the door and pulled down a dry umbrella and a long raincoat. He held them out to her. "If you want to leave, I'll walk you out. I'll wait with you until someone can pick you up. But I'm not letting you go out there alone." Elena stared at the coat, at the umbrella, at Malcolm's outstretched hand. He was not stopping her. He was just making sure she knew the cost. She felt a cough building in her chest, sharp and sudden, and she turned away, pressing her hand to her mouth. The cough came harder than she expected, her body jerking forward, and she had to grip the edge of the desk to steady herself. Malcolm was at her side in an instant, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. "Elena." His voice was low, careful. "Sit down." She shook her head, still coughing, her vision blurring at the edges. Malcolm did not ask again. He guided her back to the chair, his hand barely brushing her elbow, and she sank into it before her legs gave out. He crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. "You're not leaving. Not like this." Elena tried to speak, but her throat was too tight. Malcolm stood and moved quickly to the kitchenette. He came back with a glass of water and waited while she drank, her hands shaking around the rim. When she finally caught her breath, Malcolm stepped back and leaned against the desk, arms crossed. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "You can't keep running from this." Elena looked up at him, her eyes stinging. "From what?" Malcolm met her gaze without flinching. "From being seen." The words hit her harder than the cough had. She set the glass down and turned her face away. "You don't understand." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his tone measured. "Maybe I don't. But I know what it looks like when someone's afraid of being vulnerable. And I know it's not weakness." Elena felt the tears threatening again, and she hated it. She hated that Malcolm could see through her so easily. She hated that she could not put the armor back on. She hated that some part of her did not want to. Malcolm moved to the window and pulled the blinds halfway down, dimming the harsh glow of the security lights outside. Then he turned the desk lamp to face the wall, softening the light in the room. He pulled a chair from the corner and angled it so that it created a barrier between Elena and the door, a small pocket of space that felt less exposed. He did not explain what he was doing. He just did it. And Elena understood. He was giving her control over the space, over how much she wanted to be seen. She watched him as he moved, efficient and deliberate, and something in her chest loosened. Malcolm returned to his seat across from her, far enough that she did not feel crowded, close enough that she did not feel alone. He leaned back, his hands resting loosely on the arms of the chair. "You don't have to talk about it, but if you want to, I'm here." Elena looked down at her hands, the sleeves of the hoodie bunched around her wrists. Her voice came out small, uncertain. "It's not about the clothes." Malcolm nodded once. "I know." Elena swallowed hard. "It's about being told what to do, about someone else deciding what's best for me, about not having a choice." Malcolm's expression did not change, but she saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Who told you that?" Elena shook her head. "It doesn't matter." Malcolm's voice was firm but not harsh. "It does." She looked up at him, and the words came before she could stop them. "I had a relationship. A long time ago. He was older, successful. Everyone thought we were perfect together. But he wasn't. He controlled everything. What I wore, how I looked, who I talked to. And when I tried to say no, he made it seem like I was being difficult, like I was the problem." Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Elena kept going, the words spilling out now. "He used to tell me I needed to change before we went out, that I looked too casual, too uptight, too something. And if I didn't do it, he'd get angry, not loud, just cold, disappointed, like I'd failed him. So I'd change, every time, because it was easier than fighting." She took a shaky breath. "And after a while, I stopped knowing what I actually wanted. I just knew what he wanted. And that felt like drowning." Malcolm leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. His voice was low, deliberate. "How long ago?" Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. 7 years, maybe 8. I left. I built my career. I built this version of myself that no one could touch. And I told myself I was fine. Malcolm's gaze did not waver. But you're not. Elena let out a bitter laugh. No, I'm not. Because every time someone tells me what to do, even if it's for a good reason, I feel like I'm back there, like I'm giving up control all over again. Malcolm nodded slowly. That's why you froze when I told you to change. Elena nodded, her voice breaking. I know it doesn't make sense. I know you were just trying to help. But in that moment, all I could think was that I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't let someone else decide for me. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice steady. I'm not him. Elena looked up at him, startled. Malcolm held her gaze. I'm not him. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you safe. And if you don't want my help, you can say no. But you have to know the difference. Elena felt something crack open inside her. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Malcolm leaned back again, his expression softening just slightly. When my daughter was 5, she went through this phase where she didn't want anyone to help her with anything. She'd scream if I tried to tie her shoes or cut her food. She wanted to do it all herself. Elena managed a small smile. What did you do? Malcolm's mouth twitched. I let her, and I watched her struggle. And when she finally asked for help, I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just helped. Elena's smile faded. That's not the same. Malcolm shook his head. It's exactly the same. She needed to know she had control. That asking for help didn't mean giving up her power. It just meant she trusted me. He looked at Elena, his voice quiet. You don't have to trust me. But I'm not going to make you feel weak for needing help. And I'm not going to take your choices away. Elena felt the tears coming again, but this time she did not try to stop them. She nodded, wiping her face with the oversized sleeve. Malcolm stood and walked back to the kitchenette. He returned with a clean dish towel and handed it to her without a word. She took it, grateful. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the rain filling the space between them. Then the lights flickered. Elena's head snapped up, her heart racing. The overhead fluorescence dimmed, brightened, then dimmed again. Malcolm stood immediately, his hand moving to his phone. Probably just the storm. Backup generator should kick in if it goes out. But Elena was already on her feet, her breath coming faster. The lights flickered again, and this time they stayed dim. The room was cast in shadows, the only light coming from the desk lamp and the glow of Malcolm's phone screen. Elena backed toward the wall, her hands trembling. Malcolm moved toward her slowly, his voice calm. It's okay. It's just the power. But Elena shook her head, her voice rising. Someone's going to come. They're going to check the building. They're going to see me like this. Malcolm stepped closer, his tone steady. No one's coming. The security guard already did his rounds. The cleaning crew doesn't come until morning. It's just us. As if on cue, a loud knock echoed from the hallway. Elena flinched, her eyes wide. Malcolm's expression tightened. He walked to the door and looked through the small window. Then he turned back to her, his voice low. It's maintenance. Checking the breakers. I'll handle it. Elena shook her head frantically. They'll ask questions. They'll see me. Malcolm moved back to her, his voice firm but not harsh. They won't. I'll go out. You stay here. Door stays locked. Elena wanted to argue, but her throat was too tight. Malcolm walked to the door, unlocked it, and slipped out into the hallway, pulling it shut behind him. She heard the muffled sound of voices, Malcolm's low and steady, the other man's gruff and distracted. She pressed her back against the wall, her heart pounding, and waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. She could not hear what they were saying. She could only hear the rain and the hum of the backup generator kicking in somewhere below. Finally, the door opened, and Malcolm stepped back inside. He locked it behind him and turned to face her. He's gone. Generator's handling the lights. We're fine. Elena let out a shaky breath, her knees weak. Malcolm crossed the room and stood in front of her, his voice soft. "You okay?" She nodded, but she was not. She was shaking again, her hands clenched into fists. Malcolm watched her for a moment, then spoke quietly. "You thought he'd see you, and you thought that would be the end of it." Elena nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't let people see me like this. If they do, they'll think I'm weak. They'll think I can't handle it. And then everything I've built will fall apart." Malcolm shook his head slowly. "That's not true." Elena looked up at him, her eyes red. "You don't know that." Malcolm's voice was steady, unyielding. "Yes, I do. Because I've seen you lead. I've seen you make decisions that no one else could make. I've seen you hold this company together when it was falling apart, and none of that changes because you got caught in the rain." Elena felt the tears spilling over again. "Then why does it feel like it does?" Malcolm stepped closer, his voice low. "Because you're scared. And that's okay. But being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." He gestured toward the chair. "Sit down. You're exhausted." Elena did not move. She stood there, trembling, her arms wrapped around herself. Malcolm waited. He did not push. He just waited. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let people in without losing myself." Malcolm's expression softened. "You don't have to let everyone in. You just have to let the right people in. And you get to decide who that is." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw it. The steady patience, the quiet strength, the refusal to treat her like she was fragile. Malcolm was not trying to fix her. He was just standing beside her while she figured it out. She took a shaky breath and nodded. Malcolm stepped back, giving her space. "You want more tea?" Elena nodded again, and Malcolm moved to the kitchenette. She watched him work, precise and unhurried, and she felt the panic start to ebb. When he returned with the mug, she took it with both hands and sat down slowly. Malcolm sat across from her, and they stayed like that, silent and steady, while the storm raged outside. After a long while, Elena spoke, her voice quiet. "Thank you for not making this harder than it already is." Malcolm looked at her, and the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. "You don't have to thank me for doing the right thing." Elena managed a small smile. "I think I do." Malcolm shook his head. "Then you've been around the wrong people." Elena felt something shift inside her, something small but significant. She looked down at the mug in her hands, at the warmth spreading through her fingers, and she realized that for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was learning how to breathe again, and Malcolm was the one teaching her. They sat in the quiet for a while longer, the rain softening to a steady drizzle against the windows. Elena felt the warmth of the tea seeping into her bones, but there was still a tremor in her hands that had nothing to do with the cold. She had let Malcolm see her tonight, really see her, and now that the moment had passed, the fear was creeping back in. Not the fear of being vulnerable, but the fear of what came after. The fear that tomorrow, when the sun came up and the storm was over, everything would go back to the way it was. And Malcolm would look at her differently. Or worse, he would pretend this never happened. She set the mug down on the desk and stood, her movements careful, deliberate. Malcolm watched her but did not move. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, the oversized hoodie hanging loose on her frame. Her voice came out flat, distant. "We should forget about tonight." Malcolm tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Why would we do that?" Elena turned away from him, facing the window. "Because it's easier. Because tomorrow I go back to being the CEO, and you go back to being my assistant, and none of this matters." Malcolm stood slowly, his footsteps quiet on the floor. He did not come closer. He just stood there, a few feet behind her, his voice steady. "Is that what you want?" Elena clenched her jaw. "It's what makes sense." Malcolm was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and his tone was firmer than before. "No, it's what's safe. And there's a difference." Elena felt the words hit her like a slap. She turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to tell me what I want." Malcolm held her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not. I'm telling you what you're doing. You're trying to put the armor back on before it's even dry." Elena shook her head, her voice rising. "Because that's what I have to do. That's how I survive." Malcolm took a step closer, his voice low but unyielding. "Survive what? Being human? Being seen? Because if that's what you're running from, you're going to be running for the rest of your life." Elena felt the anger flare hot in her chest, but underneath it was something else, something raw and frightened. She turned away again, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. "You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to have people waiting for you to fail, to have every mistake blown up in the media, to know that one wrong move could destroy everything you've built." Her voice cracked. "I can't afford to be weak, not even for a second." Malcolm moved closer, but he did not touch her. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "This wasn't weakness. This was trust. And if you can't see the difference, then you're letting him win." Elena froze. She turned slowly, her eyes wide. "What?" Malcolm met her gaze, his expression serious. "The man who made you feel like you had to be perfect. The man who made you afraid to be human. You're still letting him control you. And he's not even here." Elena felt the tears coming again, hot and furious. She tried to blink them back, but they spilled over anyway. Her voice came out broken, desperate. "I don't know how to stop." Malcolm's voice softened. "You already did. You let me help you tonight. You told me the truth. You didn't run. That's how you stop." Elena shook her head, her hands trembling. "But what if I can't do it again? What if tomorrow I wake up and I'm right back where I started?" Malcolm stepped closer, and this time he did reach out. He did not touch her, but his hand hovered near hers, close enough that she could feel the warmth. His voice was steady, grounding. "Then you do it again. And again until it gets easier. And if it doesn't, then you ask for help. That's all you have to do." Elena looked down at his hand, at the space between them, and she realized that Malcolm was not asking her to change. He was just asking her to trust. Not him. Herself. She took a shaky breath and nodded. Malcolm stepped back, giving her space, and moved to the desk. He picked up his phone and checked the screen. "Driver's close. Maybe 10 more minutes." Elena nodded again, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She felt exhausted, hollowed out, but there was something lighter in her chest, something that had not been there before. She looked at Malcolm, and her voice came out softer than she intended. "I'm sorry." Malcolm frowned. "For what?" Elena gestured vaguely. "For making this harder than it needed to be. For panicking. For not trusting you." Malcolm shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology. You were scared. That's not a crime." Elena let out a small, bitter laugh. "It feels like one." Malcolm's expression softened. "That's because you've been taught to see it that way. But it's not. Being scared just means you care about something. And that's not weakness. That's strength. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw the truth in his eyes. Malcolm was not like the others. He did not see her fear as a flaw. He saw it as proof that she was human, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. She took a slow breath and nodded. "Thank you. For tonight. For not giving up on me." Malcolm's mouth twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. "I don't give up on people, especially not the ones who are trying." The sound of a car pulling up outside broke the moment. Malcolm glanced at the window, then back at Elena. "That's your ride." Elena nodded, but she did not move. She looked down at the hoodie, at the borrowed sweatpants, and then back at Malcolm. "I should probably change back." Malcolm shook his head. "Keep them. Your dress is still wet. I'll have it sent to your place tomorrow." Elena hesitated. "Are you sure?" Malcolm's voice was firm. "Yes." Elena pulled the hoodie tighter around herself and moved toward the door. Malcolm was already there, holding her coat and the umbrella. He helped her into the coat, his movements careful, respectful, and then handed her the umbrella. Elena took it, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. She looked up at him, and her voice was quiet. "What happens tomorrow?" Malcolm met her gaze. "Tomorrow you go back to being the CEO, and I go back to being your assistant. But you don't have to pretend tonight didn't happen. Not with me." Elena felt the tears threatening again, but this time she smiled through them. "I don't know how to do that." Malcolm's expression softened. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Elena nodded, and Malcolm opened the door for her. The rain had slowed to a light mist, and the air smelled clean and cool. Malcolm walked her to the car, holding the umbrella over her even though she already had one. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Elena turned to Malcolm one last time. Her voice was steady now, stronger. "Thank you for not looking at me like I was broken." Malcolm's gaze did not waver. "You're not broken. You're just learning how to heal. And that's not the same thing." Elena felt something settle in her chest, something warm and solid. She nodded and slid into the back seat. Malcolm closed the door gently and stepped back. Elena looked out the window at him, standing there in the mist with his hands in his pockets, watching her leave. And for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was running away. She felt like she was learning how to stay. The car pulled away from the curb, and Elena leaned back against the seat, the hoodie still warm around her shoulders. She clutched the towel Malcolm had given her earlier, the fabric soft and familiar. The warmth she felt now was not just from the heater or the dry clothes. It was from something deeper, from the knowledge that someone had seen her at her worst and had not turned away, that someone had stood beside her and had not demanded anything in return, that someone had given her back her power instead of taking it. Elena closed her eyes and let herself breathe. The city lights blurred past the window, the rain fading into the distance. And somewhere in the quiet of the car, in the space between fear and trust, she felt herself begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, she did not have to carry everything alone. That asking for help was not the same as giving up control. That being vulnerable was not the same as being weak. And that real strength was not about never falling. It was about knowing who would help you stand back up. She opened her eyes and looked down at the hoodie, at the sleeves that hung past her hands, and she smiled. Tomorrow would come. The cameras would flash. The board would meet. The world would keep turning. But tonight, she had learned something that no amount of success could teach her. She had learned that love, real love, was not about control. It was about safety. It was about trust. It was about being seen for who you really were and being loved anyway. and that was worth more than any perfect image she could ever build. The next morning, Elena arrived at the main office wearing a crisp navy suit and her usual armor of confidence. But something had shifted. When she passed Malcolm's desk, she did not just nod and keep walking. She stopped. She met his eyes, and she said quietly, so only he could hear, "Good morning, and thank you." Malcolm looked up from his screen, his expression calm, professional. But there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Understanding. Respect. Trust. He nodded once. "Good morning, Miss Rothman. Your 9 o'clock is ready when you are." Elena smiled, just a fraction, and walked into her office. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, breathing slowly. The hoodie was folded neatly in her bag, washed and ready to return. But she had not given it back yet. She was not sure she wanted to. It had become a reminder, not of weakness, but of the moment she had chosen to be human instead of perfect. And that choice had not destroyed her. It had made her stronger. Real love, she had learned, did not demand perfection. It did not strip away control or force vulnerability. It created a space safe enough that you could choose to be vulnerable. It stood beside you in the storm and handed you an umbrella instead of telling you not to get wet. It did not make you smaller. It made you braver. And sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was not to fight alone. It was to say 3 simple words and mean them. I need help. Because asking for help was not surrender. It was trust. And trust, Elena realized, was the foundation of everything worth building.